So now without further delay, let's begin today's event, sponsored by Aura and hosted by Employee Benefit Advisor. It's my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Lynn Gresham, former Editor-in-Chief with Employee Benefit News. Lynn, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Greg. Good day, everyone. We're pleased to have you with us for this web seminar, Cyber Wellness in the Age of Breach, Building the Business Case for ID Theft Protection Voluntary Benefits. With vast numbers of employees now working from home, the need for cybersecurity has never been greater. Today you're going to hear from two experts how widespread data breaches are and how you can help your clients and their employees with identity theft protection benefits. I'd like to introduce our speakers to you now. Eva Velasquez is the President and CEO of the Identity Theft Resource Center. She previously served as the Vice President of Operations for the San Diego Better Business Bureau and spent 21 years at the San Diego District Attorney's Office. Eva is recognized as a national expert on identity theft, data breaches, scams, and related topics. She's been featured on such top media outlets as CBS, NBC, Forbes, Kiplinger, the New York Times, Reuters, and the Washington Post. Eva is the driving force behind the first free ID theft help app and the ITRC hands-on privacy program, which aims to empower our community to protect their mobile data. She is regularly invited to speak at government and business events in the United States and United Kingdom. In addition, she serves as an ID theft victims advocate and regularly provides their perspective at congressional and senatorial briefings in Washington, D.C. She's been recognized for her work with numerous awards. Meghan Solomon is the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for the Employee Benefits Unit of Aura Company. In this role, Meghan partners with some of the country's largest brokerage firms to develop strategies that optimize their clients' benefit plans with Aura's best-in-class cyber wellness solutions. Over the past 2 decades, Meghan has held a variety of strategic and sales-based roles across the technology industry. Prior to joining Aura, she served as the VP of Strategic Partnerships for Equifax and was responsible for providing national brokerage firms with counsel on ID Watchdog, Equifax's ID theft protection and financial wellness solution for employees. She also worked as a strategic client director for Equifax's Enterprise Healthcare Solutions division, helping large organizations use analytics to navigate challenges related to healthcare and the Affordable Care Act compliance. In today's seminar, Eva and Meghan are going to talk about the prevalence of data breach and the primary reason it's occurring, cyber wellness benefits that can reduce breach risk for employers, how advisors and HR can build the business case for identity theft protection, and finally, partnering with Aura. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn the program over to Eva.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you everyone on the line for taking time out of your busy day to join us. I'm really excited to tell you about the Identity Theft Resource Center and what we do. We were founded in 1999 as a 501c3 nonprofit victim services organization, and all of our services are free to the public. As you can see by this list of services, we really take a holistic approach when it comes to addressing identity and cyber crimes. People can engage with us on a variety of platforms, whatever they're most comfortable with, including our toll-free hotline, live chat. They can engage with us on social media, and we even have our free ID Theft Help app that was the first victim assistance app funded by the Department of Justice Office of Victims of Crime. Folks reach out to us to receive one-on-one advice and assistance regarding scams, privacy concerns, identity theft, risk minimization, and remediation, and of course, the topic today on data breaches. Because we've talked to hundreds of thousands, literally hundreds of thousands of victims and consumers over the last 20 years, and we continue to hear from them daily, we really understand what they need and how they're feeling. Our role, particularly my role in the data breach space, is to humanize this data. We're going to be looking at quite a few statistics, incidents, occurrence rates, and the like, and I want to set the tone and the reminder that behind each of these statistics, there is a real-life human being that's being adversely affected. We began tracking data breach occurrences from public record sources back in 2005. We manually collected data from a variety of publicly available sources, the many state attorney general's websites, HHSA, and various other notification sources. It stemmed from our need to understand the landscape in order to better assist the folks that were contacting us in the wake of a breach. Breach victims often reach out to us with their notification in hand, and the universal question has consistently been, but what does this mean to me? It was a puzzle for them, and while they had all the puzzle pieces, they didn't necessarily have the ability to put those pieces together and understand what they were looking at. We realized that we needed to start tracking incidents and develop a better understanding of that so that we could put that puzzle together for them and provide them with a meaningful interpretation. We track all aspects of breaches, and we're constantly updating what we track based on those trends. Was this a hacking incident, an employee error, unsecured database? And we also track what type of data was compromised. We get very granular here when it comes to exactly what record types we're talking about. Back in 2005, when we started this project, we tracked 7 different types of PII or compromised records, and now we track 52. It's really important from a remediation standpoint because the risk minimization, the critical risk minimization steps are so different. They vary from breach to breach. So the steps, say, for an existing financial account data breach are going to be wildly different than a password and login credential data breach. And breaches are so ubiquitous now, and because of all the high-profile breaches over the last 5 to 7 years, most people have heard the term, and they have a high-level understanding of what a breach is. And the overall state of breaches is that they are going to continue, unfortunately, in staggering numbers, and really have become a part of our life. In addition to the one-on-one assistance that we provide, we also use this data to issue our end-of-year data breach report. Here are all those statistics that I wanted to humanize for you. You'll see, I'm sorry, my slide is not advancing. There we go. Here are all those statistics that I wanted to humanize for you. You'll see in 2019, we did see a 17% increase in the number of incidents. There was a blip in 2018 where the actual number of incidents decreased slightly, and we were hoping that would be a trend. Unfortunately, it didn't last. And by the way, in 2018, we also saw that there was, despite that slight increase in incidents, we saw a significant increase in the number of records compromised, which only indicated to us that the thieves were getting better at infiltrating databases and capturing large swaths of data in a single event. That's why it's important to not only look at the number of incidents, but the number and types of records exposed in each one. So while year over year we'll see fluctuations in different areas, the long-term trend remains that incidents and number of records compromised continues to increase. Let's discuss the difference between sensitive and non-sensitive records. Sensitive records, they identify a specific person, but they're generally not publicly available. So things like your social security number, your driver's license number, even your biometric data. Non-sensitive data can also generally be attributed to a specific person, but it's also most of the time publicly available or known. The most common non-sensitive record types that we currently capture in our database are date of birth, home address, phone number, followed closely by personal email address. I think in general, we understand how harmful it is to have our sensitive, personally identifying information compromised, but it's trickier with non-sensitive records. We may be a little too quick to dismiss them as unimportant or worthless data, and that's just not the case. In the fight against fraud and identity crimes, industry uses detection analytics that leverage more and more non-sensitive data points. So your date of birth as a single data point may not create an increased risk of identity crimes in and of itself, but when you combine that with other breach data and other data that's available about you, it certainly makes for a more robust, complete picture of a specific identity. A good example of the fraud analytics that I suspect everyone on the line can relate to is when your bank contacts you regarding a specific purchase and asks, is this you? They ask because those fraud detection analytics have triggered that purchase needs further verification. And in order to detect anomalous behavior, they have to have a baseline for our normal behavior. So that biometric behavioral data is being tracked and monitored. In this case that I just mentioned, it's for legitimate fraud detection purposes, but the thieves know this too. If they have more information about you, the better their chances of going undetected in those fraud detection analytics. Therefore, this useless, and I'm making air quotes here, data it's actually quite valuable. One of the other key trends in 2019 was the increasing problem around unsecured data. That's simply data that should have been protected, but it was left out in the wild. It can be a little challenging to understand why that's a problem. Sometimes it's even hard for the experts to measure the impact of this unsecured data in a meaningful way. The best analogy I can give is that it's similar to the difference between having your wallet stolen versus losing it, with the data breach being the stolen wallet and the unsecured data being the lost wallet. If I leave my wallet on a table at a restaurant and I know it's not secure, but I don't know who has access to it or who found it or if they're even going to use it, I hope whoever does find it simply returns it to me or gives it to management or something like that. That's unsecured data. But if my purse is actively ripped off my arm while I'm walking down the street, I know the person that did that has criminal intentions, and that's more similar to a data breach. It really has become a growing problem, and part of the reason why is it's so easy to make a mistake in the configuration of databases in the platform. Sometimes it's as simple as not checking a box to make sure the information isn't publicly available online when the database is set up. And for our part, we're really asking for additional fail-safes here by the platform providers to ensure that it's harder to configure these databases incorrectly. We'll be continuing to track this as part of our report through 2020. As I said before, we also look not only at what data was compromised or exposed, but how it occurred, and developing an understanding of where our vulnerabilities, and the big our, us as a collective, where those vulnerabilities exist when it comes to infiltration and exposure. It allows us to provide insights and guidance to industry and government. In addition to the top three methods that you see on the screen, we also capture insider theft, physical theft, and data on the move. Data on the move occurs when sensitive data, either in physical or electronic form, is stolen from an unsecured location. So, for example, a work laptop that's left in an employee's personal vehicle but is stolen. As you can see, hacking and unauthorized data are occurring at similar levels, but these are very different events. And while employee negligence is occurring at a lower rate than the other two, 10% is not insignificant. We're going to get into the risk minimization tactics in just a moment, but from a strategic standpoint, it's all about resources and company culture. More resources need to be applied to cybersecurity, and leaders need to build a culture that values cybersecurity and good cyber hygiene of all employees. I think we all have a decent understanding of what hacking is. Simply put, it's just exploiting vulnerabilities in a computer system. Keep in mind that all of our systems are connected to each other, from servers to printers. It's not just about desktops and laptops, it's about networks. The hackers in the target breach actually accessed the point-of-sale system through an HVAC vendor. It was a vulnerability in the system that was in place to monitor the freezers, whether they were working or not, and the temperatures, that allowed the hackers to infiltrate the system that housed all of the financial data. In regards to phishing, remember that people use these systems, but they're also part of the system itself. And sometimes they're the vulnerability when they accidentally fall for a phishing email or click on a link. Patching is also a really important prevention measure. The Equifax breach has been attributed to a failure to patch a known vulnerability in Apache struts. And it's not enough to just have the policies in place, although that's necessary and organizations should have cybersecurity policies in place, but you need to implement them too. And when we think about hacking and intrusion, there's sometimes a misconception that it's only the IT department or the executive's job to worry about those things. And while it may not be your job, anyone here on the line right now, to actually be the one applying patches to those systems, you do have a role to play there. And it can be your role to practice good cyber hygiene yourself. And if you're a team leader or manager, you can make sure your team is doing the same. And we can recognize and realize that the habits and practices of every single person in an organization matter, and that even their personal online behaviors can have an organizational impact. For instance, good password habits. If someone on your team uses weak passwords over multiple accounts, not at work, but on their personal accounts, they're really personally vulnerable to cybercrime. But if they're engaging in that same behavior with company login credentials, now the company's vulnerable. And does your organization have mechanisms in place to address that? Do employees receive training on the importance of using strong and unique passwords both at work and at home? And if not, why not? So just to reiterate, by ensuring that people understand what best practices look like, both at work and at home, you're not only protecting your employees from personal vulnerabilities, you're also protecting your company. Even though unauthorized access looks similar to hacking and intrusion, it's not the same. Remember, hacking is infiltrating a system by exploiting a vulnerability. Unauthorized access is gaining access to that system using legitimate credentials, but without permission. The outcome is the same. Someone gained access to information they didn't have permission to access. The process is different. Legitimate credentials are being used. And a common way this happens is through credential stuffing, which is on the rise. I know I sound a bit like a broken record here, but this is why good password habits are so important. When we hear about breaches of passwords and login credentials for accounts that seem to be pretty innocuous, people sometimes wonder, why would anybody want my login and password to my online newspaper or magazine subscription? Businesses sometimes have the same misconception. If the data set doesn't have financial information or sensitive personally identifying information, it doesn't have any value to the thieves, and it doesn't necessarily need to be protected. That's really not the case. It's not the content they're after, it's the passwords. Because we have a habit of using the same passwords over and over again on multiple accounts, in fact, some surveys suggest that as many as 83% of us admit to using the same password for more than one account. The hackers know this, and they take these credentials and they start attempting to use them through these automated large-scale login requests. That's what credential stuffing is. And hopefully, armed with greater understanding about how dangerous this behavior is, people will start breaking that habit of reusing passwords. Look, we all have to acknowledge that we're human, and human beings make mistakes. But there is some room for improvement here. Initial and recurring training is necessary, but also really important is creating opportunities for discussion that allow employees to admit that they don't understand something or why it's important. Our advice is rather than simply issue do's and don'ts, which certainly can be helpful, but they don't go far enough, let people ask questions about why a particular policy or process is the way it is, and be prepared to answer those questions. Work towards creating a culture where people can step forward and admit that they've made a mistake. If an employee does actually fall for a phishing email, you want them to be comfortable reporting that error immediately, and you want them to know who they're supposed to report it to immediately. Having an atmosphere where employees are afraid to report it, so they cover it up out of fear, obviously that's not healthy for any company. And of course, I'm not talking about willful disregard of policies. That needs to be handled differently. But I am talking about having a process in place to address mistakes that allows for full transparency at every level in an organization. And honestly, we need everyone to be more transparent about breaches. Businesses that have been breached need to fully disclose what's occurred to the best of their ability and provide detailed information about exactly what was compromised. Sending out notifications that are opaque doesn't actually help anybody, including the breached entity. And the last comment I'll make here is about access and disabling accounts. Making thoughtful decisions about who has access to what and what level of access is really important. Does that person need access to that data in order to perform their job duties? If the answer is yes, then by all means, grant it. But if the answer is, well, that position has always had access, that might be a good time for a reevaluation to make sure that this is still the case, particularly if you haven't done that kind of internal exercise or review in a while. It's also critically important to have a process to immediately disable access with employees when there's a change in relationship. Allowing disgruntled employees to have access to a system after they no longer work for your company creates a tremendous risk for your systems, your customers, and your entire organization. I am having a little bit of trouble with some of my slides, so I apologize for that. Breaches have a financial impact on everyone involved. Both the businesses and the customers, clients whose data has been compromised are definitely affected. Small businesses are not immune to these effects. In fact, they likely feel them more sharply. And the loss of trust can be a business-ending event. In the years that I've been watching the company and customer reactions and interactions, I've realized that it's not just about the breach event, but how the company handles communications post-breach. I know here I go talking about transparency again, but if affected individuals feel like a company was transparent about what occurred and how it will affect them and what's been put in place to address it, the trust will rebound much more quickly versus an organization that doesn't appear to have taken that responsibility of data protection seriously. I mean, data breaches, again, they're part of the public lexicon now. There's an absolute expectation from the public that if you're collecting data about me, you will be a good steward of that data. What are the consequences of these data breaches that we've been talking about? One of them is identity theft, and it's a big one. Individual victims suffer certainly financial impacts, but there are non-financial impacts as well. We've been conducting the Identity Theft Aftermath Survey for more than a decade, and we asked the victims that we've assisted in the contact center to share details of their experience so we can better inform the public about how traumatic victimization is. Consider the domino effect when you look at some of these statistics. 22% reported that they took time off work, 28% lost interest in work. And when you think about the individual, someone had to support that workload, coworkers, managers, supporters, or supervisors. And then when you factor in the emotional toll of victimization creates an impact, not just on the worker, but in the workplace. People report to us being distracted, feeling fatigued, having difficulty sleeping, and being anxious. So even if they are coming into work, employees that are fatigued and anxious aren't able to perform at their highest level, even if they really want to be. Sometimes when I speak with folks, they ask me, but is it really that bad, Eva? I mean, it's just a financial crime, and people get their money back, right? Is it really that big of a deal? The reality is that millions of people are impacted by identity theft annually. It was the #1 complaint to the FTC last year. According to Javelin Research, there were 14.4 million victims of identity theft in 2018, and that's in just 1 year. The additional impacts that I just talked about there were that I haven't talked about are the downstream and lost opportunity costs that we often struggle to measure. When people lose a job, or they aren't hired for a job, or they can't rent an apartment or buy a home, those opportunities have a short shelf life. And when children are victimized, which children are victimized as well, it is particularly troubling to us because it has such a lifelong impact. When I hear from young victims that they weren't able to get student loans or financial aid because they were victims of identity theft, I think about the long-term repercussions of that. And if they have to pause their higher education goals for a semester or a year, which is not unusual, until they restore their identities, they're now permanently behind their peers. If you're interested in more information about the Aftermath series, the full series is available on the ITRC website. Now it's time for me to hand this off to Meghan, but I just want to kind of wrap up by saying I know that these statistics and effects are a bit unnerving, but it's important that we don't ignore the problem and learn as much as we can about it. So that's my wrap up. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Eva. This is Meghan Solomon. I'm looking at some of the questions that have been coming in while you've been talking, and this information has been so helpful. There is one question here that's come in a couple times. Do you have time for one more question?
Of course.
Okay, great. So let's see. We've received this question, like I said, from several different folks. We'd like for you to explain more about the term that you used earlier, cyber hygiene, and what companies and individuals can do to ensure best practices in this area.
Oh, that's a great question, by the way. And it's fairly intuitive. So hygiene is a set of behaviors or practices that's, conducive to maintaining good health. I think we all know that. Cyber hygiene is also a set of behaviors and practices, and they're conducive to reducing risk online and in the cyber world. I think the important thing to remember is it's not just one and done. It's not just set it and forget it. If you think about your health, if you went to a doctor and asked, how can I stay in optimal health? Your doctor wouldn't tell you just to do one thing. Just brush your teeth twice a day and you'll be good to go. He or she would give you a list of things to do daily and regularly, and they would be practices. Maybe eat less junk food, exercise daily, get enough sleep, practice stress reduction techniques. So it's about adopting regular, healthy cyber habits and just making them a part of your daily life. And, I know right now that we have a lot on our minds, and we're all somewhat shaken by the current events. And we've been talking a lot about hygiene in general. I know it's top of mind for everyone. My heart really goes out to all of the people that have fallen ill and the folks that have lost family and friends. It's created an even deeper awareness for me about how all of our actions impact not only us and the people in our immediate circle, but the people they come into contact with and the people those people come into contact with and down the line. So, when it comes to the human experience and how we engage and interact with each other, both in person and online, this is just further cemented for me that we're all truly connected, and what we do matters not just for us, but for everyone. So stay healthy, stay safe, and cyber safe too, and stay positive.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. That's great insight. And hygiene is certainly on everyone's mind right now as we work to stop the spread of the coronavirus. So that term that you use, cyber hygiene, really caught my attention. Looks like it caught a lot of people's attention today. I appreciate you taking the time to kind of flesh that out for us a little more and talk about how that applies to the best practices that you've just gone through as far as what the ITRC has learned about what employers can do to help keep everybody safe. So now I'd like to dig into those recommendations and talk about how Aura can help our employer clients put those into practice. For brokers and consultants, this is a valuable message that is something that all of your clients need to hear right now. This is a time of uncertainty. It can be really challenging to continue business as usual during times like this. So it's really important to be able to narrow the focus of your communications so that you're really only touching on what we know are the top priorities for your customers today. And of course, that really all has to go back to cyber wellness. So hygiene, wellness, all these things. We hear about all that across all kinds of healthcare areas, physical, mental, emotional, social, even financial. And really, cyber wellness touches on a lot of those different areas because so much of what we're doing is online these days. So let's talk about how the recommendations provided by Eva and the ITRC align with Aura's mission of empowering our clients to help their employees achieve cyber wellness. In short, Aura fills the gaps between corporate security and employee action. There's, or Eva had outlined so many different methods that cyber thieves use to access data, and most of those involve taking advantage of human nature. Based on the work of the ITRC, there's no arguing the statement that human error causes breaches. And there's really only so much that a company can do, to prevent human error, or so much that you can put on the shoulders of your employees, because hackers are getting smarter and better every day. And the message that employers really must understand is that while your people are your number one strength as a company, they also can be your number one weakness. So really important to make your employees aware of how information is being accessed. Cybercrime, it's just so common, but the majority of people really don't know when they've been compromised. And in turn, that means they have no way of notifying their employer of the fact that they've been compromised, which could lead to a potential employer breach. In the world of cybercrime, information is powerful, and the speed with which employers can identify a stop in security or identify a potential breach can directly impact the cost to the company of that breach. Therefore, cybersecurity solutions for individuals, for each individual employee, really have to be a company priority. The dependence on awareness and speed support the needs to prioritize good cyber hygiene habits for all employees. Companies need their employees to be constantly cleaning up after themselves if they move through online and digital tasks. But knowing what we know about human nature and how busy everyone is these days, employers simply cannot rely on their employees to always practice best cyber hygiene. So the bottom line is, relying on your employees to take action is going to leave the company at risk. So, how can we reduce this risk for employers based on the ways different data can be accessed? We start with hacking, of course. That's the one that everybody knows really well. Malware, ransomware, what other kind of ware that you see out there. There's just a ton of digital forms of intrusion that are often executed based on minor oversights in cyber hygiene on behalf of the employee. Eva outlined the important distinction between compromised identities because of hacking versus self-compromise. So this is not necessarily a nefarious activity on the part of the employee, but there are just so many things to keep up with. Hacking is so sneaky. It can't really be considered employee negligence or error because these thieves are often taking advantage of humans to plant the malware and do whatever else they do. So we'll touch on unauthorized access, which Eva talked about as well, and how the Aura solution approaches that. But with both hacking and unauthorized access, as Eva said earlier, employers must educate, prepare, and empower their workforce to help protect the company. While employee education is vitally important, of course, it can't be your only defense because, as we know, humans make mistakes. We all do. And so that can leave us open to, having these things happen anyway, even if we're highly educated. But we also know that employee education is time-consuming. It's often pretty expensive to conduct, and it typically results in low participation rates unless it's a required training, which typically leads to higher costs as well for the organization to really make sure that everybody participates in that training. So to combat these obstacles of human nature, employers really need to implement automated solutions that will take action on behalf of their employees rather than just leaving everything on the shoulders of the employees to do themselves. Now, we have shared some scary statistics today. It really, based on the information that Eva and the ITRC have given us, we can say that really no employer or company is going to be immune to these types of attacks. Every 11 seconds, that's often. So brokers and consultants, this message applies to really every company you support, every industry, every size. While we recognize there are nuances to cybersecurity strategies for each employer, it's highly unlikely that your clients know absolutely everything they need to know in order to protect the company from cyber attacks. Leveraging Aura's expertise and partnership could be an incredible opportunity for you to position yourself as a valuable resource for your clients during this challenging time. So let's talk about some of the features that we have that can support these efforts. Safe browsing. This is an incredible feature. I just activated my identity guard solution when I started with Aura in the middle of last year and was amazed how easy this feature was to turn on and how much work it does on my behalf. Our safe browsing feature, it really proactively protects employees and the company from the myriad of landmines that are lurking all over the internet. If your company has blocked certain dangerous sites, That's great, but we know there's new ones popping up all the time. So those efforts really leave all kinds of cracks for the bad guys to slip through. Simply visiting a site or clicking on a link that appears to be harmless could lead to compromised security for an individual, and of course, even showed how that easily can lead into compromised security for the organization as well. So really, I think the key is understanding that confusing users, confusing individuals is really the MO of these cyber thieves. They're counting on human nature to leave the door open for them. And this safe browsing feature literally follows the user through the internet to ensure that they are identifying and blocking any nefarious sites, making sure that none of that confusion can take advantage of the user. And this automated service simply asks employees to click a few buttons just one time when they activate their service, and safe browsing will be online with them every single time they're there, no matter where they go. You may also notice a very small print at the bottom of the screen, but there's a statistic here that says 26% of people say they take work home. And I'm sure there's other statistics around how many people have been working from home up until now. But of course, we all know with the recent events of the coronavirus, more people than ever are working from home. And that number of people taking work home has skyrocketed. There are a lot of people now who are working from home for the very first time in their lives. So there's a high likelihood that a lot of employees are not accustomed to taking many of the steps that they need to at home that maybe their companies automatically did for them at work. So it's great to have a personal VPN as well, and that is a part of the Aura solution and a part of our total digital halo. Our VPN solution builds on what safe browsing does for users by protecting against those tiny cracks and security measures that hackers have learned to exploit. For example, public Wi-Fi leaves a million microscopic cracks in the form of information flowing through transit. The simple act of checking email at the airport could open the door for hackers to access data, and even as Eva and the ITRC team taught us earlier, both sensitive and non-sensitive data can be leveraged by these thieves in order to access secure areas. So even if you think it's a very simple little email, you never know what kind of door you might be opening. And not a lot of us are spending time in airports these days, so that isn't happening quite as often, but those types of intrusions can even happen on a home network. A lot of home networks don't have as strong of security measures as you would expect from a large corporation. So adding this feature into for individuals really does close that gap between what the company is able to do as far as security goes and what they need their employees to do. We come in and we kind of fill that gap in between those two. We also have an incredible risk management feature that really differentiates us from any other cybersecurity or identity theft protection vendors in the market today. Our exclusive partnership with IBM allows Aura to leverage Watson's groundbreaking artificial intelligence capabilities as a key part of our solution. And so when you sign up for the Aura solution, there's a combination of user inputs, and then Watson steps in with machine learning and is able to develop a personalized risk profile that supports our ability to better automate proactive protection on behalf of users. So with the machine learning and the AI, Aura gets smarter and smarter and gets to know each one of our users and their family members and identify areas where they may be putting themselves at risk to help them close those out before a theft occurs. Very proactive look at protecting our users. So I've touched on a few of the ways the Aura solution helps companies prevent a breach, but despite of all these preventative measures, the unfortunate reality is that hackers are getting smarter, faster, and better every single day. These are constantly finding ways to get around the new security measures we put in to prevent a breach. So beyond all of this wonderful prevention, which is very much important, employers must also prepare for the likelihood that they will suffer from a data breach. Every 11 seconds, it's just way too common these days. So let's talk a little bit about how our process works. The first step in minimizing the damaging impacts of compromised data is really going to be the speed with which the individual or the company is made aware of the attack. Just like in the case of a house fire, as outlined on this slide, alerting is key. But if you're alerted and then you don't know what to do once you hear that fire alarm, the fire will continue to rage until help arrives. Empowering yourself and your family members with a plan of action upon hearing the alarm minimize the damage of that fire. The importance of having a resolution and plan in place prior to a cyber attack, a fire, anything like that, is simply cannot be understated. Employers must have the ability to spring into action immediately upon learning of a breach in order to have the best shot at restoring the individual and the company losses. And amazingly enough, the difference between an attempted theft and a successful theft, of course, is going to lie in the timing of the alerts. So we can alert you to the fact that someone's attempting to steal your information, and if we can alert you quickly enough for you to take action and lock that down, the efficiency, the response team that you have helping you with that is really going to minimize the damage of the compromised identity. So we're proud to say that the Aura Identity Guard tool boasts the fastest alert times in the industry. We do have an independent study that can provide you with data to back up this claim, and I'd love to share that with anybody who wants to follow up with us after this meeting. But our unparalleled alert speed is paired with our incredible resolution management team and customer call center. The Aura in-house customer service call center is located in the United States. Actually, we're in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, and I'm thrilled to report the entire team just successfully transitioned to working remotely so that we could ensure business continuity for our clients and our users, even as these mandates around social distancing continue to come forth. So I just have to say this team is just an amazing group of people. You know, we have all those statistics that I could show you, and I won't bore you with them as far as call times and everything we do very well. We can certainly share those with you. But another thing that this call center team has is an average tenure of 7 years, which is really unique in this industry. And I think that speaks a lot about, the valuable team that's there. They're going to be well-experienced experts when employees have to call in for some help with that. And beyond helping individuals when their identity is compromised, we also help our employee clients in the case of a breach. We have automated processes and world-class customer service that comes standard with the Aura solution, both for individuals, but that commitment extends onto our employer clients and our broker and consulting partners so that we really can provide a holistic solution that can help in any type of compromised data. We also have developed a customer success team so that as a broker or an employer that have chosen to place the Aura solution with their employees, you will have a dedicated expert who's proactively reaching out to you to make sure that the end users, the employer, and the partner are all getting the most they can out of this partnership. So let's talk a little bit about building the business case for cyber wellness. I think we've already kind of built it with all the information that Eva supplied, but really if you just look at how do you kind of come to the dollars and cents where it makes sense for an employer to really focus on this now, especially knowing we have so many other priorities to focus on now. Why would you want to take the time to look at this immediately? And here's the real numbers to it. We know that when an individual's identity is compromised, it impacts their ability to be productive at work. Average loss is anywhere between 12.5 to 25 days of work in order to get this cleaned up if they don't have a solution like Aura in place. So when you look at that cost as it relates to salary, you can see how it really does impact the organization. But productivity is, challenging to kind of put a dollar amount to. So when we look at, an individual compromised, that could be any different amount of cost to the organization. But if we look at it across the organization, what is the likelihood that your employees will become a victim of identity theft? Then you can see it's, on average, 33% are reporting being victims. We already talked about how many people don't know when they're victimized. So it adds up very quickly as far as lost productivity cost to the organization. And then, of course, the actual cost of breach, we know there's real dollars and cents associated with that. Right now, the average cost across every single company, regardless of size, is around $8 million. So that's that's a killer amount for a small company for sure. And of course, those big ones that we've seen and read about in the news, we're seeing those cost over $42 million. So it's really something that can completely sideswipe a company's goals and plans. They have to drop what they're doing to really focus on this breach. And the key point here is that we have solutions that can be put into place for employees to increase the security and help reduce risk for employers, and those solutions cost absolutely nothing to the employer. So as a voluntary benefit, Aura can be put into place immediately, no cost to the employer, and just something that the employees are able to decide to activate and utilize on their own at very reasonable pricing. This slide is actually one you've already seen before. Eva and I kind of switched gears on this slide, so I wanted to kind of come back to it and just revisit some of the statistics, because it's not just about what a breach costs an employer. And I have already said multiple times, regardless of how much you invest in prevention and protection, there is a chance you'll still be breached. So what's the point, right? Should we just do nothing about it? Well, no. This statistic shows you, and again, like I was saying with the fire alarm, having an alert system in place is great, but having a plan in place, an actionable plan in place that can automate everything that needs to be done in the case of a breach, that's going to save companies millions and millions of dollars. So if you're, knowing that you're going to be spending, whoever knows, 5, 8, 42 million, depending on the size of the company, definitely seems like it would be worth putting into place a new program, a new strategy, and a lot of tools around being prepared for the case that breach may occur. And the combination of prevention and preparedness is really what's going to help large employers get through these devastating breaches. So I mentioned already Aura's vision. We're really in this market to disrupt things, to show people a new way of looking at cybersecurity, to make cyber wellness something that everyone understands, and cyber hygiene are habits that are easy for people to adopt. So we really, want to support and interact with our customers on this mission to provide them with resources to help build up their cybersecurity protection and have a really good plan in place in the case of a breach. And because we're a small, nimble company with a lot of resources helping us to really get this vision off the ground and quickly, we have the ability to quickly adjust to the needs of each client. And that really gives us the ability to be excellent partners and really help our brokers and our consultants do whatever it is you need to do to make your clients happy. And that's one of the things that makes us a great partner. We're really extremely easy to work with in that capability, and we're really very flexible as well. We recognize every employer, every broker, every consultant has some different needs, and we're able to adjust around those needs. And it is much more than just identity theft protection. The Identity Guard solution is an incredibly powerful tool, and we have made some incredible improvements to it. If you haven't seen it lately, it's been around for 25 years, so it's definitely a name that people know. But if you logged in to take a demo today, you may not even recognize what you're seeing, because Aura has made so many incredible improvements to that platform. And part of what really makes us a great partner is that we have the ability, our partners will have the ability to benefit from the growth trajectory of both our company and the solution set. The comprehensive nature of our solution provides a strong value proposition for your clients, so we can also roll out little pieces of it at a time, so they don't have to take on the full comprehensive solution. Employers really can decide to dip their toe in the water and try a few things at a time. So we have a very incredibly easy, scalable solution. And beyond that, we also offer tiered commission structures for our partners that can really help, make us a very valuable partner to continue to help you earn more money as we continue to grow, expanding both the solution and our ability to support our partners. So in summary, how are we different? We've talked about a lot of these kind of key things, but I think that the one word, if you could only take away one word from today's presentation of what is it that Aura does that no one else does, we are incredibly strong in our ability to proactively protect our users. The IBM Watson tool, the AI capabilities of that tool are just insanely powerful, and it's impressive to see what that can do and how we can help people once we get to know them better. But everything that we do is very much on the proactive, let us do this for you, almost like a personal assistant for you online to make sure that you're not compromising yourself or your company, that you're not leaving behind breadcrumbs that could lead a bad guy to getting in the door. And we're really just at the tip of the iceberg at this point as far as what we're offering today and where we're going for the future. So I've already covered a couple of these new features that we have built since the acquisition of Identity Guard, but we've also been working tirelessly to enhance and expand the entire solution to really what it's known as today, which is your digital halo. So we would love to have an opportunity to go through all of this information with you in more detail. I won't bore you with too many specifics today. Just want to go ahead and wrap up and open up the floor for questions if we've got some time. But I'll just say in closing before I do that, you know, the world we live in has been evolving so fast. It seems like the average person is simply unable to keep up. Technology moves at light speed, and smart thieves are following right behind. So bringing up the rear, we've got people like me, the average people, who, frankly, I'll admit, I'm willing to trade my security for convenience. I'm one of those people. I think Eva talked about that person who has their same password across all the different sites. I'm getting better. I'm making new habits. I'm learning from the wonderful people at Aura how to make myself safer and more secure, and I have the solution in place to keep me safe. But I think this is just such a common thing. And now with the coronavirus, everything has changed. It's really forced us to slow down and take a look at our habits. Simple actions like washing our hands have become so much more purposeful to keep ourselves and our families safe. A mindless habit has now become a deliberate, life-saving measure. During this public health crisis, information is power, and the information is changing by the millisecond. So just like with keeping up with safety online, keeping up with all of the information coming out about coronavirus is absolutely just as challenging. Millions of people who maybe didn't even have much of a digital footprint prior to the outbreak are now finding new ways to conduct business, go about their lives, connect with other people via technology and the internet. And once the virus subsides, we all have to return to the outside world. It'll be like discovering a new land, and we may have to learn how to live in the new normal. So now is the time for employers to ensure that their employees have the tools and support needed to remain safely at home while continuing to protect the company online. As a partner to Aura, you can help people form new habits around their online and digital security so we can emerge from this trying time stronger, safer, and smarter than before. So I've just got a few minutes left. We've gotten a lot of questions. We will follow up with all of you. We'll be sharing a copy of today's deck and links to the sites that both Eva and I have touched on. And we can also send you copies of the reports or links to where you can find the reports that we've pulled a lot of these statistics from. It sounds like I've got about 1 minute to see if we've got some interesting questions here to address. Let's see. You stated that Aura Identity Guard has the fastest alert times of any vendor, but we literally hear that from every identity theft provider. Can you prove it? That's a great question. Thank you. We can prove it. We actually had an independent study conducted to look at the Aura Identity Guard solution compared to other leading vendors. So I can certainly provide anybody with the detailed study findings to show you the way that information was obtained and give you the facts behind that, because it's tough in this industry. It's not regulated. People can say a lot of things. So it's really important to make sure that the partners that you select can back up the promises that they're making for you. Another question, how does your employer breach service differ from the restoration services you offer to individuals? Great question. It's a completely different thing, but they're tightly intertwined, which is why we offer both services. So a lot of identity theft providers out there will just work with individuals on restoration, and if the company does have a issue, you might have to find another vendor to help with that, or you may be already, as a large employer, already set up an account with another vendor that specifically does breach protection. The key to having one partner that does both is that we are able to communicate. Our breach group and our customer support group are in constant communication so that we can help protect and restore individuals and help the company at the same time in the case of a massive breach. We're down to the very end, so I want to kick it back over to Lynn to let her close out. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Megan. It was an excellent presentation, and you certainly gave us a lot to think about. This does conclude our seminar. If we didn't get to your question, as Megan said, Aura will follow up with you offline. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for the webcast. We hope you found it valuable. And I'd especially like to thank Eva and Megan for taking the time and sharing their insights and expertise with us. Also, a special thank you to Aura for sponsoring this event. If you missed any part of the presentation, you'll be able to listen to a recorded version within 48 hours on the EBA website, and we'll be sending you an email with a link to the recording. Thanks again for being with us, and have a great rest of your day.